Good day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this training session for parents on the topic of online enticement and exploitation. My name is Anneri with ZOE Japan, based here in Tokyo. So first, a little bit about our organization. ZOE is a Greek word that means abundant life. And that is really our heart for every child. We want every child to have a free and abundant life, free from exploitation. And that is why we combat exploitation and trafficking through prevention, rescue, and restoration. So ZOE is not only in Japan, we are in 5 different countries with our head office in the United States. And you can see all the countries listed here on the screen. And I encourage you to go to our website and learn more about the ZOE country that you're interested in. So what does ZOE Japan do? Well, one of the major focus areas for us is prevention, and exactly what we are doing here today. We run webinars and seminars for schools, for children ages K through 12th grade, for parents, for teachers, for universities, for churches, for workplaces, anyone that wants to learn more on how they can keep children safe from exploitation. We also have podcasts, so feel free to listen to that. And if you scan the QR codes here on the screen, then you can find our English or Japanese channels. We are extremely active on social media in both English and Japanese because that is the main way that we can reach out to children. And that is also where all of the exploitation happens. So we post creative content several times a week on major channels here in Japan. And we use paid ads to target teenagers very specifically with that content. And that then fuels our hotline. Many teens see our posts on social media and realize what is happening to me is exploitation. I'm a victim and I need help. And they then reach out to the ZOE hotline. And we just have a wonderful team that can support in either English or Japanese. And you can see some of the ways in which children can contact us. So we have a phone number that they can phone. Most of them prefer to communicate via the Line messaging app, and they can also fill in a web form or send us an email. And of course, it's not only for teenagers and for children. As parents, you're very, very welcome to contact us anytime. Consultations are anonymous unless you want to share your contact information or your personal details. And we would love to discuss with you the challenges that you're going through and how we can try to support your family in the best way possible. We are not only in the office, we try to do a lot of outreach as well. And outreach can take different forms for ZOE. So sometimes we do community events and anyone can participate. And it's really about awareness and education. And you can see some fun photos here with our mascot, Zoe-chan. The kids just love Zoe-chan. And we love to engage with communities in that way. We also do street outreaches in major red light districts around Tokyo, where we engage directly with youth that are engaging in prostitution and try to connect them with services, or at least show them that someone values them and cares about them. We're also involved with a government-sanctioned drop-in center in a major red light area where we are able to minister to youth that are at very high risk or already victims of trafficking and just connecting them to the different services that are available to them. We are very involved with advocacy work as well. So there are many areas where laws need to be changed and strengthened to better protect children. So ZOE is part of a network called the Japan Network Against Trafficking in Persons. And that's just a group of NGOs fighting both labor and sex trafficking. And together we meet with government twice a year to discuss policy reforms and different projects and ideas and try to move forward to strengthen these policies. You can also see some examples of resources on the screen. So all the materials that we develop at ZOE is completely free. It's bilingual. It's available to anyone to download or to order from us. And I'll share a little bit more later on how you can access those resources. But then, of course, you are not tuning into this presentation to learn about ZOE. You want to learn about online enticement and exploitation of children. So let's have a look at the different topics that we are going to cover today. So firstly, I'll give you a short interview or a short overview, very specifically focusing on the online exploitation side. So today we will not talk about exploitation for prostitution, so only focusing on the online side. We will go through internet safety rules and just how important that is in order to protect children. Then how does it happen? What is the online grooming process? And how are perpetrators specifically targeting children and convincing them to do different sexual acts online? The magnitude of the problem is really important for us to understand, and this will be specifically for all the data geeks out there. I'm one of them, and I think it's good for us to see if this is just something that we hear about or how big the real challenge is and how can we effectively combat that. Then, of course, for every parent, I'm sure you are really concerned about how to recognize the signs. When should you become nervous? When should you start to ask more questions? So we will definitely look at that, and also at the factors that may make some children more vulnerable than others, meaning that we need to give extra care and support for children that meet that criteria. And then finally, just some practical ways that you can protect your children, and also what to do if something goes wrong. If you realize that your child is a victim, what steps can you as a parent take? So let's jump right in. Just a content warning, I'm not going to show any sexually explicit content on the screen, but I might use some examples or references that can be really disturbing. So if you need to pause the video and step away for a bit or take some deep breaths, please do that. It takes some time to get used to this content, unfortunately. All right, so let's look at online sexual exploitation of children. And on the screen here, you can see 3 of the major focus areas that I would like to speak on today. Firstly is the online sextortion. Now, online sextortion is a form of blackmail. So typically what we see here are strangers that are connecting with children online and convincing them to send nude images or videos of themselves, and then extorting the children for either more images or for money. And we'll go in a lot more detail into the process and how that works. Secondly is child sexual abuse material. The legal term for this is child pornography, but we always use the term child sexual abuse material because that more accurately explains what is really happening to these children. So this would be a situation where you have a child that is nude or semi-nude or engaging in some form of a sexual act. It also includes audio recordings of child sexual abuse, and usually this could be someone that has access to that child and creates that content and then distributes or sells that content online, very often through the dark web. And this is a major focus area for us here at ZOE Japan. And then finally, we will look at generative AI and deepfakes. So really a new technology. All of us are starting to use AI, and it can be wonderful to use AI. But unfortunately, we are also seeing how this is being used for nefarious purposes. So we'll look a little bit at that. Okay, so maybe you can just sit there and reflect with your spouse what the condition is in your home. Do you actually have internet safety rules in place to protect your children? And even more importantly, do your kids follow those rules? And I'm sure you're having that discussion right now and nudging each other. Yes, we have some rules in our house, so let's see what the kids said. So we ran a poll on social media a while back, and we had more than 1,000 teenagers ages 13 and up that responded to this poll. And you can see the results. So we asked, do you have rules regarding internet and social media use in your family? And it was quite disturbing to see that a lot of families don't have anything in place according to the students that responded. And only roughly 12%, 11 or 12% of the children said, yes, we actually have rules in our house and I am following those rules. So a few angels that we have in this group, but for most of the children, they either don't have rules or they are ignoring those rules in secret or just being rebellious and refusing to follow their parents' rules. Now, what are the risks when children do not have those boundaries and when they do not follow those rules? There are many different risks, but one of the main areas of concern for us is exposure to pornography, especially hardcore adult pornography in video format. And again, we ran a poll on the same platform, and we again had more than 1,000 teenagers that responded. And we just asked them, how old were you when you were first exposed to this kind of adult video content? And just look at these very disturbing results. So we see that the vast majority of children were exposed for the first time by the time they reached middle school. And this could have been accidental exposure. Maybe they were playing a game and just clicked something and went to a platform they didn't want to, or a friend showed them, or there are so many ways that children could have seen that content. And I think it's really important to understand how harmful this is. Because when a child is exposed to sexually explicit content, very often violent and degrading content, they instinctively know that this is wrong. So they want to hide it from their parents because they're so afraid that you're going to take away their device and they won't be able to play the games that they want to play. So they immediately hide it, but they don't know how to process this information, how to deal with it. That image keeps on coming up in their minds and they might not even understand what they saw. Their bodies might even respond to what they saw, and that is even more confusing for them. And very often these students will try to find answers to what they see by searching online, getting exposed to even more content and being sucked into that area, or they might show their friends to try and see if the friend understands what's going on. And this just really becomes very, very harmful and continues to spread. So this is a very important talk, I think, that every family can and should have with their children, what online pornography looks like and what to do when they encounter materials like that, and that you will not take their device away, but that you will work with them to be able to cope with what they've seen and also connect them to therapy if that is what they need. And then all of these things lead to what I like to call the open door problem. And I think for all of us, when we go to bed at night, even though Japan is such an incredibly safe country, most of us still lock the door. We still lock the door at night. And I'm sure if you come home from work late at night, maybe you had a meeting, if you walk into your house and there's a strange guy sitting in your child's bedroom, you would absolutely freak out. You would throw that person out of your house and you would call the police and take immediate action. So I think we know how to physically take care of children in these dangerous environments. But when we put a device in a child's hand and that child goes into their bedroom at night with that device, you are opening that door for a stranger to enter their bedroom and to do terrible, terrible things. So I really want to encourage you as you think about your internet safety rules in your home. One of the rules that's really important to explain to your children why that rule needs to exist and to be very firm on that is that phones need to be used in plain sight and that we should never allow children to take phones into their bedrooms because terrible things do happen. All right, so what happens? What happens when someone wants to target a child online, and how does that grooming process work? So grooming is a technical term that we use, and it means to build trust with the child. And the purpose is exploitation. So they want to win the child's trust, break down any kind of boundaries, and then start to solicit content from that child. So mostly we see that this happens either through online games or social media. And the social media platforms that you see here on the screen are some of the main ones that are used here in Japan. In other countries, there may be other platforms, including, I'm thinking of Snapchat, for example, and there are so many others. So here are some of the examples being used here in Japan. And through our hotline here at ZOE Japan, we see in many, many, many cases that the grooming process starts with Instagram and then moves over to the line messaging app where they are communicating privately to the child. So all platforms have a high risk. We just see that it's quite common in Japan to target children with those specific platforms. And that also matches the statistics from the National Police Agency. So what does this grooming process actually look like? And I'm going to use a real example just to try and illustrate that. So there was a situation with a young girl, and you can see an AI-generated image on the screen. At ZOE, we never show real children's faces. So this girl was about middle or high school age, and she had a great social media profile, really sweet, and started to connect with different students, male students, about the same age. And she would follow them, invite them to follow her back, and start sending direct messages, and she would flirt with these young boys and just suggest to them, if you send me some of your photos and videos, I will send you some of mine. And she convinced more than 100 young teenage boys to send her sexually explicit content of themselves. And the police started to investigate. This is a very, very serious issue. And they managed to find this young girl. And they were surprised that this is not what she looks like at all. A more realistic picture, again, AI-generated image that is closer to the real Cindy, is this one. So as you can see here, this was an adult male in his late 30s. He was married, had his own children, and what's very concerning is he's a teacher, or was a teacher, at a high school. And many of the students that sent their photos and videos were students that were either in a sports team that he coached or attending one of his classes. So this was major, major concern, of course, in that school. And this is one example of hundreds of thousands of examples of online sextortion or online exploitation. We receive so many of these cases all the time at ZOE Japan, where someone created a fake profile, and if you and I went into that social media profile, we would be convinced that this is a real teenager, same age as your child. We wouldn't suspect anything, and they are grooming children and convincing children to do things. We very often see that it takes approximately 1 hour from the first time that a perpetrator reached out to a child to the point where they have sent sexually explicit content and maybe considering self-harm or even suicide. Now, what are some of the trends that we are observing when these perpetrators have these images of these students? Well, a very high-risk area for us actually is teenage boys. This is not only in Japan, this is a global trend where teenage boys are at higher risk of online sextortion scams than girls right now. And with these teenage boys, usually the perpetrators want them to pay money. So they would already have a list of followers and threaten that they would expose these images or videos to the friends and family, or even to the school that this child attends. And they want this child to pay money in order for the perpetrator to keep quiet and not distribute those images. And of course, we never want students to pay that money. With girls, we observe a slightly different trend. So with girls, usually the perpetrators demand more images, more extreme content, which is then sold on the dark web. And a very disturbing trend, especially with the rise of AI now, is the peer-on-peer abuse. So we are seeing that a lot of the perpetrators are students in the same school or in a neighboring school. And they are getting these images and using it to bully or shame the other students, or it could be for financial extortion purposes as well. And sometimes it links back to the pornography exposure that we talked about earlier. A student sees something and they don't know what it is, or they might want to reenact it, and they reenact it on a younger sibling or a friend. So the peer-on-peer abuse is really a big area of concern. So we have students that may be victims, but they can also become offenders, so victim offenders. So we talked a lot about the social media platforms. That is a major concern, but I want to emphasize how crucial it is that you pay attention to online games. When we visit the different schools, we hear that a lot of students are being groomed through online games and receiving really inappropriate content from potential perpetrators. So some of the focus areas you can see on the screen here, and firstly, I want to focus on age restrictions. So when we ask the students, many of them raise their hands when we ask, hey, do you use a fake age in order to get access to a real game? And so many little hands go up. And this is really, really disturbing. Now, I know as a parent, you are probably encouraging your children not to put their real date of birth or real age or share any kind of personal information. But very often, these online games have security settings that are tied to those age restrictions. So if the child pretends to be older, some of those security settings might not work. They might not be switched on, putting that child at a much higher risk of being targeted by someone online. So it's extremely important to pay attention to the age restrictions on that game, and age restrictions are there for a reason. So please do not allow your child to play if it is not age appropriate, or make sure that you control those age settings so that they are not exposed to content that they should not be. Now, even if they are using the right age, they're still at a high risk, because perpetrators also create fake profiles. They also pretend to be 7 or 8 years old. So there are a lot of different ways that they can bypass those restrictions. And that leads us to the second point, which is around strangers. Once again, when we ask students, how many of you have followers or people that you play online games with that you don't know, they're so excited to share. And you hear things like, oh, I have 200 followers, I have 400 followers. And these are people that these children have no idea who they are. These are complete strangers, which means that maybe for a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, they really will believe that this is another child their age. And at some point, when there's enough trust being built, they might receive really disturbing content or being encouraged to engage in behavior that you would certainly not approve of as a parent. So really important to pay attention to the followers on your children's games or social media platforms, and make sure that you actually know each one of those children. And it's not a friend of a friend of a friend or introduced by someone else, and just to try and keep them away from strangers as much as possible. Then we have secret accounts and games and apps. This is always so interesting when we are speaking to young students. Many of them really want to play a game. Parents don't want to allow it, so they have already found ways to bypass that and to hide that from their parents. A little bit less common with the very young ones. With teenagers, we always use the example and say, we know you probably have 2 or 3 Instagram accounts. The one that your parents can see, the one that only your friends can see, and you probably have a secret one with a really strange username where you might be looking up other things that you don't want anyone to know about. And when we use those examples in the room, you immediately see the body language of the students and you see how nervous they get and how they just drop in those chairs. So it's more common than you might imagine. So there's no way to control this just with different restrictions. We need to be able to really have a good trust relationship with children so that they understand the dangers that they might face. And then finally, the area of public profile, especially with teenagers, I would say this is a bigger concern. So with public profiles, what we mean here is that there's no restriction. So the children completely post any photo or their bio or information that they would like to share with the world, and anyone can see that information and start to build up a profile about your child. So extremely important that if you do have a child engaging in online games or on social media, to check the security settings and make sure that that profile is only visible to the people that you as a parent feel comfortable that they should engage with. Right, so let's switch gears and start to talk about generative AI. Now, we love AI at ZOE. I think AI is amazing. It is speeding up things. All these little images that you see here, they were created by AI, so we love using it. We're not against AI. But we are concerned about the harmful way that it is being used, specifically with online exploitation. And let me share 3 of the main areas that we are concerned about. The first one here is text-to-text. So you can imagine maybe an example, a non-exploitation example would be if you go into something like ChatGPT and you say, please create an HR policy for an organization that meets the following criteria. And it pops out a document, a text-based document, and you can modify that further and use that in your organization. Now, the same approach is being used by online perpetrators to create manuals on how to groom and sexually exploit children. So in the past, a perpetrator had to spend a lot of time trying to learn online from other people doing it, and it was trial and error. Now, just with a couple of text prompts, he can get a very, very detailed instruction manual helping him to know the best and fastest way to convince a child to do exactly what he wants them to do. And that could be online exploitation or contact exploitation, where he has real access to that child. So the spreading of information and how to is really accelerated with AI technology. The second area of concern is text-to-chat. Now, in the past, perpetrators had to go online and one perpetrator was communicating with one child and sending the actual messages him or herself. However, now the technology is so far developed that they can set up chatbots doing that for them. So AI-generated text communicating with a child, and this same perpetrator now has the ability to groom hundreds of children at the same time. So that just floods the industry with new content and so many children that are being groomed without an actual person sitting behind the computer. Then finally is the text-to-image side, where images are created by using very detailed text prompts, and this could also be manipulation of images. And a very big focus area here would be deepfakes. So that is where someone takes a real photo of a real child and they manipulate that into a sexual photo. So they are modifying it from other content. And it can look extremely real. The technology in the last couple of months has developed so far that it's sometimes impossible to determine whether this is AI generated or the real thing. And video has caught up now as well, so we're already hearing reports of video generated deepfake content featuring children. And sometimes this is done by perpetrators in a school where they want to bully other students in the school. It's very common among teenage boys especially, and other times it could just be a perpetrator that is trying to use this for extortion purposes. So very, very disturbing, the text-to-image content. Now, we are giving a lot of dark information here, and I think it's important to point out that AI is being used in a very positive way by law enforcement, by tech companies, and there are so many organizations that are using their expertise and using this technology also to find ways to combat these online crimes. So it's not all doom and gloom, there's always hope, but we need to get ahead of this thing as quickly as possible. So I would like to share some statistics, and as I said, that's for everyone that is like me and would like to see some of the numbers. And I'm going to show 2 slides to you. So the first slide is by an organization, or the data is from an organization called InHope. So InHope is a European-based organization, and what they do is to establish hotlines all around the world. There are 52 countries now, and I think about 57 hotlines in the InHope network. And these hotlines have the responsibility to act on behalf of their local law enforcement agency to receive URLs and reports from the general public about sexual content online that you might be concerned about. So you can, if you stumble upon something on the internet or on social media, you can copy that URL and you can send it to one of these hotlines, and they will analyze those images and issue an instruction to take it down if it is illegal. Now, in Japan, there is also an InHope hotline, and it is called the Internet Hotline Center. So feel free to look that up, and we'll give you the URL on the screen as well. So the InHope hotlines worldwide, this excludes the United States. I will point out United States in the next slide. So for the other hotlines around the world, last year they saw 4.7 million reports by the public of possible child sexual abuse material. And in 3.2 million of those cases, they confirmed that it was actual CSAM, child sexual abuse material, that met the requirements to be illegal content. In the other cases, it could have been that the content was not illegal, or it could be that they couldn't really determine if this was a child or potentially an adult, or there could have been other reasons that made that hard. And the concern is not only the really, really huge number, but the concern is that this was a 450% increase from the year before. Now, we know that if we do a lot of awareness and we just raise the issue out in the public as much as possible, there will always be an increase in reports. But I have never seen a 450% increase simply because of more awareness around a specific issue. So we think that one of the reasons is that AI is so sophisticated now that it's really just fueling the industry, and more content is produced very, very quickly. Now, in line with that, the next slide is very text-heavy. I'm not going to go through all of that, but this is the data from the NCMEC, so National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the United States. It is from their cyber tip line, which is just a massive, enormous, fantastic hotline where they receive all kinds of reports of missing children or children that are victims of trafficking or online exploitation. And here you can see staggering numbers. 20 million reports received last year, and then 1.5 million of those had some connection to generative AI. Now, there's a lot of detailed information here at the bottom that I'm not going to go through, but feel free to freeze this or to go to the original blog. I just did exactly copied and pasted from their blog article there, so you can read more information and just see how AI is being used by these perpetrators. So very, very disturbing content for all of us. But as I mentioned, law enforcement, they're not sleeping. They're all trying to do their part, and we are seeing more and more international collaboration, which is really exciting because this is absolutely an international crime. And just one, I think, positive story specifically for Japan is there was an article released on various platforms. I just chose the Japan Times here in April of 2026. And you can see here that 99 people were identified and accused in Japan in one sting operation in a crackdown on specifically child sexual abuse material. The year before, we know that the National Police Agency had a similar initiative and they arrested over 100 perpetrators. And we know that this is just the tip of the iceberg, but they are doing great work to empower police officers and to really try and identify where are these people and what are they doing. And these were perpetrators all in Japan. If you actually look at that article, we have the URL there at the bottom, you will find that this was an international operation, and I think it was close to 500 perpetrators in different countries that were identified. So please look that up and be inspired that something is being done. So the big question then is, what can you do to protect your child? And the very first thing that we need to realize is that all children are at risk. Traffickers don't discriminate. Online perpetrators don't know whether your child is the smart kid or maybe struggling, or a rich kid or poor kid, or they have no idea. So they just look for any kind of vulnerability, even if it's just in the moment, that they can exploit. But there are some factors that might make some children more vulnerable than others. And I think it's important for us to pay attention to that. So you can see here a whole list of factors. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I would like to point out specifically bullying. Bullying is an area of concern, and if your child is being bullied in school, please take that very seriously. And the reason why we say that this is a serious issue is that often when children are being bullied in school and they don't have any friends in school, they turn to online friends for companionship. And even if that online friend is doing something that might raise a red flag for them, they're so desperate to keep that friendship, they're so afraid of being alone, that they might overlook that and might do things that you do not want them to engage in. So this is definitely an area to take very seriously and to address with the school if your child is a victim of bullying, and also to encourage your child to share with you the challenges that they are going through there. I would also like to just point out specifically the neurodivergence. We have received many inputs from schools saying that specifically children perhaps that are on the autism spectrum or ADHD sometimes do not immediately recognize that what the perpetrator is saying online could be harmful to them. So it's important to just pay additional attention and to give best support to children that meet any of these requirements. But again, it's not limited to these children. Any child that has a device in their hands can be at risk. So let's make sure that it doesn't matter who your child is, to be able to share with them how they can stay safe. Then who are the perpetrators? Now, we always imagine some creepy guy in a dark room with a hoodie. You know, that's how we always visualize it in our presentations. I've never seen a perpetrator in a hoodie in dark rooms, so I'm sure they exist. But actually, they come from everywhere and anywhere. And we have, just through our very small hotline here in Tokyo, I can give examples of every single one of these, of cases that we have personally dealt with. A lot of strangers online, that is daily life for us. We've had sibling perpetrators. We have had parents that are making footage of their own children and selling it on the dark web. Definitely people pretending to be a romantic partner for that child. A lot of exploitation in the school system, and we're very grateful that Japan will start a sex offender database specifically to support the school system from December 2026. And then you can see the other roles here. So anyone can be a perpetrator. A perpetrator can be any age and can be male or female, can be in Japan, can be outside of Japan, can communicate with your child in English or in Japanese or use AI translation tools. There really is no limit. So it is important that if your child raises the alarm and indicates that any person did something that is uncomfortable to them or maybe seems like exploitation, please take it very, very seriously. It's always important to do that. So the best way that you can prevent exploitation is not by fancy filtering tools and apps. That is fantastic. Please make sure you have those. But the best way that you can protect children is through a trust relationship. If your children feel that they cannot come to you, they're too afraid that you will freak out, take away their devices or ground them or do other kinds of things, then they will not disclose when things start to go wrong. So it's important not to have a once-off conversation, but to have regular conversations about this, to encourage them and to say, if something happens online, I want you to discuss that with me because I want to walk with you and support you. And when you have that trust relationship, that is 90% of the prevention that you need. And then, of course, there are other things that you can do, like the internet safety rules, like sex education, and especially dangers around pornography. And please make sure that you do that as well as implement those different filtering tools that we suggested. I will have a QR code at the end of this presentation where you can get some example resources that you are very welcome to use. Some of the signs that you can look out for is, especially if your child starts to isolate themselves, maybe you see a change in friends, maybe you see a dip in academic performance and they're always tired, especially if they have their phone in their room at night. Someone might be keeping them up late at night, chatting with them, pushing them to send different messages, text or image-based messages. So please start to pay more attention when you see these signs. Of course, if they're very obsessive about a specific game or app, you can start to monitor if they receive messages. Maybe they seem anxious, maybe they seem upset, maybe they're very secretive and don't want you to see what is actually happening on their device. So then it is time to work with that trust relationship and to have deeper discussions. Now, just to be very clear, your child maybe just didn't study for that test, right? Or maybe they're just having a really rough week with a lot of activities and they're just really tired. So if you see one of these signs, don't go into panic mode and think that my child is definitely a victim of exploitation. No, it's when we start to see a pattern. It's when we start to see multiple signs and you know your child, you know when something is off. So please put it in context, be calm and address it early to make sure that they stay safe. So what if you realize that your child is already a victim of exploitation? What should you do? The first thing is that you need to put on your best acting performance, Oscar level, and stay calm. You will feel as if your blood is just freezing in your veins. You will feel anxious, you will feel angry, you will feel disappointed, you might feel guilty that you were not able to protect your child. But right now, your child needs you to be the calm adult in the situation. The worst possible thing that you can do is to lash out and say, "Why were you so stupid? How could you do that?" That is the worst possible thing to do. So please fake it until you feel that you have your emotions under control and stay calm in the situation. The next thing to do is to assure your child that it's not their fault. As we already shared, they are up against very sophisticated criminal networks many times, against people who have been doing this sometimes for years to hundreds or thousands of children. There is no way that your innocent child can stand against that level of sophisticated processes and tools that is really designed to groom them. So it's not your child's fault. Never blame the child, doesn't matter how old they are. Of course, they may have not followed the safety rules, and that is a different discussion. But right now, it's important for them to understand that you are on their side. Stop communicating with the perpetrator. This is extremely important. And please save all evidence in the original form. So as a parent, take those screenshots, make sure that you save it, videos, everything. Do not alter or delete anything. I know you might feel tempted to crop out some of the child's face or certain things, but that can become important later if you decide to take formal action. So please save all the evidence until you have decided the next steps that you want to take. Never pay, never send more images, never communicate with the perpetrator. And then you can really consider your options, consult with different stakeholders, and decide if you just want to protect your child and make sure that they get the right trauma therapy and support, or if you want to take further action and actually go after the perpetrator. If you want to do that, it would be extremely important to report it to the police, and processes can be quite complex in Japan, so feel free to reach out to us or to your local child guidance center, and you can also contact the One Stop Support Center on #8891. The English support might be different depending on where you are in the country. So feel free at any time, if you are unable to speak Japanese, you're welcome to contact our hotline, and our Japanese speakers would be more than willing to assist you with that. All right, but what about young children? Because a lot of the signs we talked about maybe is very relevant for teenagers, but maybe you have a really young child and you're concerned that maybe your child is in a school environment where you feel uncomfortable with the teacher of that school, or there's maybe some other person on the school grounds and you think that something could be happening, just as an example. So here you would not be looking for those typical online signs, but you would be looking for other things. Now, the first thing to do from a prevention perspective is the education. It's so important for young children to know accurate names for body parts. There are so many wonderful resources, again, available at the end of the session, recommended books and videos and tools that you can use to educate your child. It's not the school's job. Please take that responsibility as a parent to do that, but teach them the age-appropriate information, and here are some of the topics that we suggest that you should cover in your education for your child. And also please use extreme caution with phones and tablets. Make sure that it's always in view and that you know exactly what games they're playing and the settings of those games. But then you might still see that there could be different things that gives you concern. For example, if a child, maybe it could be your own child or your child's friend, starts to demonstrate age-inappropriate sexual language. Sometimes we see sexual play, so they're trying to touch body parts of other children, or perhaps they're afraid to make physical contact with one of the parents. I remember a case where a child was a victim of sexual exploitation by a female perpetrator, and suddenly she didn't want to have anything to do with her mother. So that was a very clear sign specifically for that mom. They might be trying to touch their own private parts in public, or you might see different attempts to show that to adults or to others. So of course, there's also it's really important to remember that children are developing their bodies. They are curious about their bodies, so they might sometimes innocently engage in some of these behaviors. So again, don't panic immediately, but start to pay attention to these signs, start to ask those questions and see if this is really age appropriate, or if something they may have been exposed to, or something that may have happened to them. Now, when that happens, it's important to have a deeper discussion with your child. And at the end of the session, in the QR code, you will be able to find this resource. You can also order it from us if you prefer a printed copy, and it's in Japanese and English. And we call it the Tell an Adult card. So sometimes children don't have the words to explain what happened to them. And this is a great way for them to just point to the picture. So as an adult, you can go through and you can say, oh, did someone look at your body? Or perhaps did someone try to take a photo of your body? Or did they ask you to keep it a secret? So all of these different things you can go through step by step. There are some suggestions at the back of that card for parents or educators, and the child can point to the picture to help explain what happened to them. And there are other wonderful resources out there as well. This is just one tool that might be suitable for your child. Feel free to use that. And I think introduce this tool early so that when something happens, they know they can use this card and come to mom or dad and start to share. Then just some other resources. If you scan these QR codes, then you will get access to other content. So this QR code will take you to a playlist on our YouTube channel. The Japanese list is also available if you prefer that. And these are little 3-minute videos, just animated content and on different topics. And they're very short and sweet. And they would just provide some education, different things that you can do to keep your family safe. Then we have an internet safety guide for parents. And because of the just huge number of requests about Roblox, we also prepared a safety guide specifically for Roblox, because it can be a little bit tricky to navigate how to do those security settings. So if you scan this QR code there, you will find these resources as well as other resources, and please use them. Just remember, we are not an IT company. We do not produce prevention specific resources for every platform out there. That is not our area of expertise. But if there is something specific that you would like to know, please reach out to us. If we can find that resource or easily put together something, then we would love to support you in that way. But it's always important for you to also check what is already provided by the platform. And I think that is it for our session today. So we would love to hear your feedback. Just any feedback, constructive criticism about the session, or if you have any topics that you would like us to share more about in a future session, please use this form to evaluate the content and also to share with us your wish list. And then if you would like to subscribe to our newsletter, you can also, as an optional field, put your email address and name in the same form. And then we will know to add you to that newsletter, and we won't spam you and send hundreds of emails. We usually send 1 email per month. So feel free to register for that or unsubscribe anytime if the content is not useful to you. And then finally, if you would like to reach out to us, here's our contact information. So info@gozoe.jp, or just our website gozoe.jp, and it's available in English and Japanese. Or you're welcome to contact us on this number or the hotline number displayed on the website. So thank you so much for your time. We hope that this session was valuable to you, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.